My name is Brenda. I'm presenting here on behalf of myself, but also of my colleagues, Therese Bird and Gronia Connell. At the time this project was happening, we were all part of the University of Leicester. We're not so much, so we're in different paths now. But yeah, this is really funny, because if I stand here, I kind of just see the column, but I think you can all see me. But then if I stand here, I can't see you. That's funny. Anyway. So this project is about the evaluations of some MOOCs that the University of Leicester delivered. So I'm assuming pretty much everyone knows what a MOOC is here, right? Anyone? We're good? Okay, so just a brief summary. They are massive, not because they have lots of students, but rather because they have that infrastructure to be able to cope with large number of students. They are online because they are delivered via the internet. They are open, because any person in the world with an internet connection can access materials without fees and without any strict prerequisites of knowledge or demographics. And they are courses because they are a coherent academic intervention with a set of learning outcomes, defined learning outcomes, and usually start and end dates. So MOOCs have brought lots of controversy about whether they work, whether they are any useful, whether they are sustainable as a business practice. So when the University of Leicester started joining this scenario, they wanted to know what was happening, and that's where this project started. The university designed 2 MOOCs for FutureLearn, which is the first UK-led MOOC platform. They were part of the first MOOCs that were run through this platform. So we started with 2 MOOCs. One was in England in the time of Richard III. If you've been following the news, I have to stand here. If you've been following the news, you'll know that Richard III, his body was recently found in Leicester, and that was kind of a big thing. So we wanted to make use of that, so we had this MOOC. We had over 10,000 students. The second MOOC was about forensic science and criminal justice. We had over 12,000 participants. Both MOOCs were designed at entry level. That meant that we didn't expect learners to know anything about these topics. They were not required to buy a book. They were 6 weeks long, although the Richard III MOOC had 2 weeks in between because it was a Christmas break, so they just had this activity about cooking food that related to England in those times. And they had 2 study hours per week, 18 pages of materials, the text, audio, images, videos, discussions, quizzes. Academic staff would take a look at what's going on in the courses, and every week they would send an email summarizing the issues that had arisen and also setting up the scenario for the next week. We also had Twitter hashtags for both of the MOOCs. And for the forensic science MOOC, we had a Twitter chat, a 1-hour-long live Twitter chat at the end, live Twitter chat. So this is pretty much how it looked for participants. If you have seen FutureLearn, well, this is how it looks. So you have like all the weeks, and then every week you'll have all the pages of things that you can be doing. In every page, there's default space for comments where discussions can happen. And you'll know what you're still missing to do, and you can mark as completed everything, pretty much. So for the evaluation, we had several data sources. So first, learning analytics, and then we had 3 surveys. So the first one was a standard pre-course survey, just to get a demographic profile of our participants. And we had over 2,000 responses for the Richard III MOOC, and roughly 800 for the forensic science MOOC. So those were not a lot of people. There were a lot of people, but not everyone that was enrolled in the course. For the 2 post-course surveys, well, the first one was the standard FutureLearn instrument. And the problem with that instrument is, we found it later when we were conducting the evaluation, is that the questions related to FutureLearn, not necessarily to our MOOC. So we had to create a second survey, which we sent only to the people who had given us their email address to participate in future research. So we only had 391 participants for the Richard III MOOC and 140 for the forensic science MOOC. With these post-course surveys, it's important to note that most of the people who answer them, they're actually active participants. So that kind of biases a little bit our results, because we are having the perceptions of people who liked it enough to give an extra. So our participants were mostly female, over 45 years old, so it's not precisely a young population, mostly from the UK, but that makes sense because it was a UK-led platform. And most of them had some sort of university studies. In terms of participation, well, we saw basically what usually happens with MOOCs. So it went really great at the beginning, and then just participation started dropping, but that's kind of normal. Reasons to drop out that were mentioned were not having enough time, losing interest or motivation, or just failing to keep up. And then once they fail to keep up, it's kind of hard to catch up, and then they just leave it. Something else that happened that was great was that discussions were occurring naturally, always. So sometimes we didn't ask people to comment on things, but they would. As I said, every page had a default section for comments. So people would always be commenting on those. So that was great. In the first week, we had over 7,000 comments. And between, well, 35% in the Richard III MOOC and 41% in the Forensic Science MOOC, they were unsolicited. It was just people wanting to share what they thought about what they were learning. So I thought that was great. We had 8-9 comments per learner on average. We also had conversations going on via Twitter. And interestingly, they also moved to Facebook to continue their conversation. Some people said that they had moved to Facebook because it was more manageable. Because one of the few things they not necessarily complained about, but they were not thrilled about it, was the discussions, because sometimes there were just too many messages. So they said that on Facebook it was manageable because they could only be like 100 people talking instead of 10,000. So in terms of the feedback we had, the main reasons for them to enroll in these courses tended to be more exploratory. So it was not really about the topic of the courses, it was more about learning new things in general, about trying FutureLearn, about trying MOOCs, about trying out online learning. Yet, their favorite aspect was learning about the topic. Well, they said that the level of the courses were about right. Some people said it was too basic. I think that has to do with the fact that most of them had university studies. So these courses were designed at entry level, and actually that's one of the challenges of MOOCs, making sure the level is right, because what some people find too easy, it's too hard for others, and vice versa. So it's really, really tricky. What they liked most was activities related to interactions with the content. So watching videos, reading articles, following links, doing quizzes, which is funny because they tended to communicate so much and yet they didn't mention that as their favorite thing. Pretty much everything was positive. They said the structure was clear, the educators were engaging, the amount of time required was about right, the overall experience was satisfying, the expectations were met or exceeded, and the optional comments were pretty much positive. And when we asked them to describe the MOOCs using 3 words, these were the main 3 words: interesting, informative, enjoyable. But we had lots of other words: stimulating, challenging, fascinating, fun, educational, enlightening, and so on. So as I said, the discussion forums, well, not discussion forums, because it was just this space for comments, were tricky and not so much appreciated by participants. We had a couple of comments, like this ones. Not knowing if someone had liked or commented on your posts made it difficult to strike up a dialogue, which I would have liked, or far too many comments to make it sensible, and the comments rarely seemed to match once I shared or felt relevant to what I was wanting. So please remember that these MOOCs took place when FutureLearn was new, so it was a pilot. So now, FutureLearn has changed the layout, so now you can actually see comments for everyone, the ones you're following, the most liked, your comments, and so on. So they are making it manageable, so people can actually engage in some sort of meaningful conversation. Anyway, so that light. So first, one of the cool things we learned from this project was that people were more open towards online education. Most people had these exploratory expectations and reasons to enroll in our courses. So it was about learning how to learn online. And that's great. That has important implications for institutions that offer online courses. Because MOOCs, what MOOCs are doing is helping people know what this is about in this free way. So for no cost, you can have a go at what an online course is. And then maybe if you like it, you'll want to enroll in an actual paid online course. So that's good. We also saw that MOOCs were being used as a lifelong learning opportunity. And that was good. As I said, most of our participants were over 45 years old, and we actually had a very important part of them that were over 60. So we had comments like this one. I really enjoyed this course. I took this course because I recently retired and had some spare time on my hands. I'm not trying to further my career prospects or my academic prospects. My memory is not good at the best of times, and I take these courses to keep the little grey cells working. We thought that was brilliant. A MOOC is kind of like community service. We're helping these people, just keep going. We had several comments like that. There was also this lady that was 70 years old, and that she had taken this course just, to keep learning. Thought that was great. Also, MOOCs were used as introduction to the topic and degree programs. So we had a couple of people that were thinking about going back to school, people that had stopped their education, had gone working, and were thinking about going back, but they weren't sure if they would be able to cope. So like person number 1, he says, this course was very useful as it showed that I could go back to school and learn something that I was interested in. So the actual comment is longer. So it was this man who had stopped school, had been working, and he wanted to go back, but he wasn't sure if he had the study skills required to be able to succeed in higher education. And now he felt more confident that he would be able to go back. The other thing we found was people that were considering taking a master's in a topic. So that happened mostly for the forensic science MOOC. So the university has a master's program in forensic science. So we had a couple of people that had thought about enrolling, but they weren't sure if they would like it, if the topic was right for them. So by taking this MOOC, they could have a taster. So we have that comment, definitely worth looking at a rather bite-sized of what the studies involve so that you can determine whether or not you would like to take this further as a study option. So actually we had at least 2 students that specifically did that and that we know it. So they took the MOOC and then they enrolled in the master's. And that's the final highlight we had. So MOOCs can be used as part of a student recruitment strategy, and that's important because MOOCs have been criticized because the business model part of it, we don't really know how to pay for MOOCs, but what we found is that 387 people that had contacted the university had learned about us through a MOOC. And out of those, 37, and we're talking about a 3-4 month period, 37 applied to study with us. So that's actually quite good, because if we get them to enroll with us thanks to a MOOC, that pretty much covers the cost of producing the MOOC. And then you also have all these other benefits of helping people learn more and sharing, etc. So I think I've been talking just too fast. I don't know how much time I have left, but that's all for me for now.